The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wide beneath a dome that showed the stars beyond. 200 species sat in their assigned seats, their forms ranging from massive rock creatures to beings made of light. At the human section, Ambassador Min-jun Park stood alone, his simple gray suit a stark contrast to the elaborate armor and robes worn by others. He had served the council for 12 years. He knew every face in this chamber, had shared meals with half of them, and had helped resolve disputes for nearly all of them at some point. Today, something felt different. The usual pre-session chatter was absent. Species who normally greeted him warmly looked away. The session bell rang, a deep tone that silenced the chamber. Council leader Zarthen, a being resembling a massive insect with crystalline wings, rose from the central podium. "We gather today to address a matter of grave importance," Zarthen announced, their translator rendering their clicking sounds into perfect common. "The Krathax Dominion has submitted a formal motion for vote." From the warrior section, Commander Vexillar of the Krathax stood. He was 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales, with 4 arms that ended in claws. His people were one of the oldest warrior races in the galaxy, respected and feared in equal measure. "Esteemed Council," Vexillar began, his voice like grinding stone. "For 50 years humanity has held a seat among us. For 50 years they have obstructed progress with their constant calls for peace, their endless negotiations, their weak refusal to take necessary action. When the Sector 7 pirates needed to be eliminated, humans argued for rehabilitation. When the Zorkai expansion threatened our trade routes, humans suggested compromise. When strength was needed, humans offered only soft words." Min-jun listened without expression. He had heard these complaints before, usually in private conversations. Now they were being spoken openly. Vexillar continued, "Humanity claims to value all life, but their protection of weak species slows our advancement. They waste council resources on refugee programs and medical missions to primitive worlds. They insist on including minor species in decisions that should be left to the strong. Their presence makes us weak by association." Several species nodded. Min-jun noted which ones. The warrior races, yes, but also some of the trading guilds and the territorial expansion factions, more than he had expected. "Therefore," Vexillar declared, "the Krathax Dominion formally moves to expel humanity from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Even those who had been nodding seemed surprised by the directness of it. Expulsion had only happened 3 times in the Council's 1,000-year history. Zarthen called for order. "The human delegation may respond before we proceed to debate." Min-jun walked to the central speaking platform. He did not hurry. He had learned long ago that rushing showed fear, and fear invited aggression. "Thank you, Council Leader," he said calmly. "Commander Vexillar has spoken clearly, and I appreciate his honesty. He is correct that humanity has advocated for peaceful solutions. We have done so because we have seen the cost of war. On our own world, we fought wars that nearly destroyed us. We learned, at terrible price, that strength without wisdom leads to ruin." He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes where he could. "The commander says we protect weak species. This is true. We remember when we were weak. When we first reached the stars, we were fragile, technologically behind, politically naive. If the Council then had viewed us as we are now being viewed, we would never have been given a chance. We protect others because we remember being protected." A few species shifted uncomfortably. The Valorians had sponsored humanity's council membership 50 years ago. "As for our refugee programs and medical missions," Min-jun continued, "we have never asked other species to join these efforts. We have never demanded council funding for them. We have done this work because it needed doing, and because we could do it. If the council believes this makes us weak, then we are weak. We do not apologize for our compassion." Vexlar growled. "Pretty words, but they prove our point. You are too soft for the realities of galactic politics." "Perhaps," Minjun acknowledged. "That is for the Council to decide." The debate that followed lasted 6 hours. Species spoke for and against the motion. The Valorians defended humanity, reminding the Council of human contributions. The Small Species Coalition argued that humanity was their only consistent defender. But the larger powers wanted strength, wanted action, wanted results without the constant moral questioning that humans brought to every decision. When the vote was called, Minjun stood at his seat and watched the display board. Green for keeping humanity, red for expulsion. The lights flickered as votes were registered. Red dominated the board, 127 to 23. It was not even close. Zarthen looked uncomfortable as they read the result. "The motion passes. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. You have 1 galactic standard cycle to remove all human presence from Council space and facilities." The chamber was silent. Everyone seemed to be waiting for the human response. Anger, perhaps. Threats. Warnings of consequences. It was what other expelled species had done. Minjun simply bowed, the gesture small and respectful. "We understand," he said quietly. "We will be gone within the specified time. We wish you all well in your future endeavors." He gathered his datapad, turned, and walked toward the exit. No dramatic speech, no final warning. Just quiet acceptance. As he reached the door, the Valorian ambassador called out, "Minjun, wait! We can appeal this, we can—" Minjun turned and smiled sadly. "No, my friend. The Council has spoken. We respect their decision. We always have." He left the chamber. Behind him, the silence felt heavier than any words could have been. In his quarters that night, Minjun wrote a message he would never send. He explained everything he wished he could say, everything he hoped the Council might one day understand. But he knew they were not ready to hear it. Perhaps they never would be. He deleted the message, packed his belongings, and prepared to go home. Humanity had tried. That would have to be enough. 6 months had passed since the vote. The galaxy was watching humanity's departure with varying degrees of interest, guilt, and relief. On the trade station Broken Promise, located at the crossroads of 7 major shipping lanes, Ji-Hae Kang was packing her office for the last time. She had worked here for 15 years. Her small office overlooked the main trading floor, where dozens of species bought, sold, and argued every day. On her desk sat a picture of her family back on Earth, a coffee mug that said, "Galaxy's Best Mediator," given to her by grateful Valorian merchants, and a stack of case files she was finishing before she left. "You cannot leave!" The door burst open. A Thorian merchant, his blue skin flushed purple with distress, rushed in. Behind him came a Zentabar trader, her multiple arms waving frantically. Jihi sighed and gestured to the chairs. This was the 5th emergency today. "Please sit. Tell me what happened." "She is cheating me!" the Thorian shouted. "The shipment was supposed to be pure crystal, but it is only 80%. "He agreed to standard grade," the Zentabar countered. "Standard is 70 to 90%. The contract clearly states, in your language, which I cannot read properly." Ji-Hai held up her hand. Both aliens fell silent immediately. She had that effect on people, a calm authority that came from years of practice. "Let me see the contract," she said gently. The Zentabar provided a data pad. Ji-Hai scanned it quickly, her practiced eye catching the issue immediately. "The contract is in Zentabar commercial format, which uses different purity standards than Thorian trade law. Standard grade means different things to your species." She pulled up a comparison chart on her computer. "See here. In Zentabar terms, standard is 70 to 90%. In Thorian terms, Standard is 90 to 95%. This is a translation issue, not cheating. The Thorian leaned forward, studying the chart. I did not know this. Most people do not, Jihai said. It is a common mistake. Here is what I suggest. The current shipment is worth less to you than expected, yes? And you, she turned to the Zentabar, delivered exactly what you believed was correct, yes? Both nodded. Then you split the difference. The price is adjusted to reflect actual purity delivered, which is fair to the Thorian buyer. But it is calculated using Zentabar standard rates, which is fair to the Zentabar seller. You both compromise a little, and you both maintain your business relationship. She worked out the numbers quickly. Both aliens looked at the figures, then at each other. This is acceptable, the Thorian said slowly. Yes, the Zentabar agreed. This works. They left together, already discussing their next trade deal. Jihai watched them go and smiled. That was the 73rd dispute she had resolved in 15 years. There would be no 74th. That evening, the station threw her a farewell party. The main trading floor was decorated with streamers from a dozen different worlds. Food from 20 planets covered long tables. Merchants who had wanted to kill each other last week stood side by side to wish her well. "Speech!" someone called. Others took up the chant. Jihai stood reluctantly. She hated speeches. Thank you all for coming. Working here has been the honor of my life. You have taught me so much about patience, understanding, and the importance of listening before judging. We will miss you, a small Pixian trader called out, her voice squeaking with emotion. I will miss you too, Jihai said honestly. But you will be fine. You are all smart, reasonable people. You just need to remember to listen to each other. Assume good intentions first. Most conflicts come from misunderstanding, not malice. Who will mediate our disputes? The Thorian from earlier asked. You will mediate them yourselves, Jihai said. You have always had that power. I just helped you see common ground. But the common ground was always there. The party continued late into the night. Jihai danced with aliens whose names she could barely pronounce, ate foods that humans were barely compatible with, and laughed until her face hurt. Tomorrow, she would leave. Tonight, she let herself be loved by the community she had served. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human teachers left schools on alien worlds, their students crying. Human doctors left medical stations, their patients worried. Human engineers left construction sites, their projects incomplete. Human diplomats left embassies, their ongoing negotiations suspended. They all left quietly. No protests, no angry statements, no threats about what would happen without them. They simply packed their things, said their goodbyes, and went home. On Zenith Prime, the diplomatic station that housed the council, the last human vessel prepared to depart. Station Administrator Krell, a Mantarian whose species resembled upright lizards, watched the human ship being loaded. Did they complain at all? His assistant asked. Not once, Krell said. He sounded almost disappointed. They thanked the dock workers. They paid all their fees. They even left maintenance manuals for equipment they had installed over the years. That seems very human, the assistant observed. Yes, Krell agreed. He held a data pad showing station operations. Small inefficiencies were already appearing. Response times were slower. Coordination between departments was messier. Nothing critical yet, but noticeable. He dismissed it as adjustment period. The human ship undocked smoothly. No final message, no dramatic departure. It simply turned toward human space and engaged its faster-than-light drive, vanishing in a flash of light. Krell watched the empty space where it had been. He felt something uncomfortable in his chest, an emotion he could not quite name. It felt like watching a friend leave after an argument, knowing you said things you could not take back. Administrator, his assistant said, pulling up a report. "We have the final count. The last human vessel has left Council space." "All of them?" "Every single one. Humans have completely evacuated all Council territories, all joint facilities, all mixed settlements. They met the deadline with 2 weeks to spare." Krell nodded slowly. "Efficient until the end. That was humanity for you." In the Council chambers, Zar then received similar reports from across the galaxy. Humanity was gone. They had left peacefully, professionally, completely. Some species were already celebrating, particularly the warrior races who felt they could now pursue stronger policies without human interference. But a few species were quiet. The Valorians, who had sponsored humanity. The small species coalition, who had lost their only consistent defender, and scattered individuals across the galaxy who had worked with humans and knew, in ways they could not articulate, that something important had just been lost. On Earth, Minjun Park stood in his garden and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was learning to function without humanity. He hoped they would be okay. He genuinely did. But he suspected it would be harder than they expected. Much harder. 3 months after the last human ship departed, the cracks began to show. On Refugee Station 7, Director Qualix stared at the overcrowded holding areas with growing horror. The station was designed for 5,000 refugees. Currently, it held 12,000, with more arriving daily from a war zone in Sector 12. "Where are the medical supplies?" he demanded of his logistics coordinator. "Delayed," she replied, checking her datapad. "The supplier says they cannot process our request without proper documentation." "What documentation? We have sent everything." "They say the forms are incorrect. Some certification is missing." Qualix wanted to scream. "Get me Sung-Min Lee. She handled our medical supplies. She will know what they need." His coordinator looked uncomfortable. "Director, Sung-Min Lee was human. She left 3 months ago." The words hit him like cold water. Of course. Sung-Min had run the medical supply program for 8 years. She had known every supplier, every form, every loophole. She had made it look easy. "Find out what forms we need," he ordered. "Contact the supplier directly." It took 4 days to sort out the documentation. By then, 6 refugees had died from treatable conditions. Qualix stood over their bodies in the morgue and felt shame burn through him. Sung-Min would have had those supplies here in hours. Across the station, other problems emerged. Food shipments were inconsistent. Language translation services had gaps that led to dangerous misunderstandings. The children's education program had collapsed entirely without the human volunteers who ran it. "It is just an adjustment period," Qualix told his staff. But he did not believe it anymore. On the Valorian homeworld, the plague spread through the southern continent like wildfire. Dr. Trellix, the planet's chief medical officer, stood in the emergency command center and watched the infection numbers climb. "We have isolated the disease," his research team reported. "It is a mutation of Keldar fever, highly contagious among Valorians, but not previously fatal." "Why is it killing now?" Trellix demanded. "The mutation. We need to develop a new treatment, but our disease control protocols are incomplete. Sections are missing from the database." Trellix pulled up the protocols himself. There were indeed gaps. Places where data should be, but was not. Then he saw the footnotes. Last updated by Dr. Sarah Chen, Human Medical Exchange Program. His blood went cold. The humans had run the interspecies disease control network for decades. They had maintained the databases, updated the protocols, coordinated responses across different biologies. It was unglamorous work, detailed and technical, the kind of thing most species ignored until they needed it. "Contact the Human Medical Exchange," he ordered. "Sir, that program was shut down when humanity left the Council." "Then contact Earth directly. Offer them anything they want." The message was sent. It went unanswered. Earth's communication channels were open but silent. They were not hostile. They were simply not responding. The plague killed 40,000 Valorians before Trellix's team finally developed a working treatment. It should have killed hundreds, not thousands. The delay was the difference. The delay caused by missing human expertise. At the trade station, Broken Promise, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Without Jihai Kang and the other human mediators, disputes that should have taken hours now took weeks. Merchants who had worked together for years were suddenly filing lawsuits against each other over misunderstandings that a simple conversation could have resolved. The station hired a Krathax arbiter to replace the human mediation team. He was efficient and followed the law precisely. He was also completely inflexible. Where Jihai had found compromise, he found winners and losers. Trade relationships that had lasted decades ended in his courtroom. Station revenue dropped 18% in 2 months. In the frontier territories, a mining colony called Last Hope sent a distress signal. An equipment malfunction had trapped 50 miners underground. They had air for 72 hours. The signal went out to all nearby ships and stations. No one responded. The colony was in disputed territory, claimed by 3 different species. No one wanted to create an incident by sending rescue ships that might be seen as military presence. The call reached Zenith Prime. Administrator Krell brought it to the emergency council session. "We must send help," the Valorian representative insisted. "Into disputed territory?" the Krathax commander responded. "That is a military provocation." "They are miners, not soldiers. They will die." "Then the species who claims that territory should rescue them." The 3 species who claimed the territory argued for 6 hours about who had jurisdiction. By the time they agreed to a joint rescue mission, 61 hours had passed. They found 37 bodies. 13 survivors died on the rescue ships from exposure. Krell read the report and remembered. Humans had maintained the galaxy-wide emergency rescue coordination network. They had responded to distress calls in disputed territories because they did not care about politics when lives were at stake. Every species had assumed someone else would take over that responsibility. No one had. On the border between Krathax and Zentari space, a minor dispute over mining rights escalated into military positioning. Both sides moved warships to the border. Threats were exchanged. War seemed imminent. Commander Vexillar, who had led the motion to expel humanity, found himself in an uncomfortable position. His military advisors were recommending a preemptive strike. The Zentari were likely planning the same. Both sides were certain the other would attack first. "What about negotiation?" Vexillar asked. His chief advisor looked confused. "Sir, the Zentari are not trustworthy. Negotiation shows weakness." Vexillar thought about the human diplomats who had worked this border region for 20 years. They had prevented 14 separate conflicts that he knew of, probably more he did not. They had done it through endless patience, through shuttle diplomacy, through finding solutions that let both sides claim victory. He had called that work weak. He had called it obstructive. Now he stared at the possibility of a war that would kill millions, and he did not know how to stop it. A junior officer spoke up. "Sir, I found something. Old records show human mediator Minjun Park handled a similar dispute here 7 years ago. His negotiation framework is in the archives." Vexillar grabbed the files desperately. He read through Minjun's careful work, his step-by-step approach to building trust, his creative compromises. It took Vexillar 2 weeks to implement a fraction of what Minjun had done routinely. The war was averted. Barely. Vexillar sat in his command chamber afterward, surrounded by reports of other crises across the galaxy. Refugee problems, medical emergencies, trade disputes, rescue coordination failures. Every report had the same underlying cause. Humans had been doing critical work that no one else had wanted to do, and now that work was not being done. He had called them weak. He had called them soft. He had been a fool. 8 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Grand Chamber that had once expelled humanity now gathered to confront the consequences. Council leader Zarthen looked over the assembled representatives with uncharacteristic anxiety. Half the seats were filled with species facing active crises. The other half represented species trying desperately to prevent crises of their own. This session will address the cascade of emergencies facing our member species. Zarthen began. We will hear reports and determine appropriate actions. Dr. Trellix of Valoria spoke first. His people were dying, and his voice shook with barely controlled emotion. The plague on my homeworld has killed 80,000 citizens. We finally have it contained, but the damage is catastrophic. Our disease control systems had critical gaps. Gaps we did not know existed because humans had been filling them for 50 years. He pulled up data on the main display. I initiated an investigation. Do you know what I found? Humans maintained the interspecies disease control database. They updated it constantly with new information from thousands of medical facilities across the galaxy. They cross-referenced symptoms across different biologies. They caught emerging diseases before they became epidemics, and they did all of this without asking for credit or compensation. The chamber was silent. Where were the rest of us? Trellix demanded. Where was Valorian medical expertise? We were publishing prestigious research papers. Humans were saving lives in quarantine stations on forgotten moons. We thought we were superior. We were just useless. Director Qual Ix of Refugee Station 7 spoke next. His report was devastating. Refugee processing had collapsed across the galaxy. Humans had run most of the major refugee stations, managed the settlement programs, and coordinated the supply networks. Without them, refugees were dying in overcrowded stations or being turned away to dangerous situations. The Vortan orphans, Quali said quietly, and the chamber flinched. Everyone knew that story. 200 children orphaned when their colony was destroyed in a natural disaster. They had been stranded on a failing station for 3 weeks before another species finally agreed to take them. 40 children died waiting. Humans would have had them settled within days. They maintained an adoption and foster network that spanned the galaxy. They matched orphans with families who could care for them, regardless of species. We never even knew it existed. The trade reports were equally grim. Commerce between species had dropped 23%. Disputes that should have been simple were turning into trade wars. The Thorian-Zentabar conflict had escalated into a complete embargo between their species, costing both sides billions. Human mediators prevented thousands of trade disputes annually, the commerce representative reported. They understood the cultural and legal frameworks of every major trading species. They could spot misunderstandings before they became conflicts. We have no one with that cross-cultural expertise now. Then came the military reports. Border conflicts were increasing. The Krathax-Zentari dispute was only the most visible. Across the galaxy, old tensions were reigniting without human diplomats to manage them. Commander Vexillar stood to speak. This was difficult for him. His pride warred with his guilt. I led the motion to expel humanity, he said bluntly. I called them weak. I said their pacifism obstructed progress. I was wrong. He displayed a map showing conflict zones across the galaxy. This map shows active military tensions. The red zones are conflicts that escalated in the last 8 months. The blue zones are historically volatile areas that remain stable. Almost every volatile region had turned red. Only a few scattered blue zones remained. I investigated the blue zones, Vexillar continued. Every single one has something in common. Local species leadership who were trained by human diplomatic programs. They are using human conflict resolution techniques. The red zones are everywhere else. Everywhere we return to our old ways of handling disputes." He paused, gathering courage. Humans prevented an average of 340 military conflicts per year, not major wars. Small border disputes, resource conflicts, cultural misunderstandings, the kind of small conflicts that sometimes grow into major wars. They prevented them through patient diplomacy, through creative compromise, through actually listening to all sides. The weight of his words settled over the chamber. The reports continued for hours. Ecological monitoring networks failing without human researchers. Deep space rescue coordination in chaos. Educational exchange programs collapsed. Scientific collaboration reduced. Hundreds of small systems unglamorous and overlooked that humans had maintained simply because they needed maintaining. Finally, Zar then spoke. "We have heard enough. The question now is what we do about it." "We invite them back," the Valorian representative said immediately. "We apologize. We offer them full council membership with expanded privileges. We offer them trade advantages," the Commerce Guild suggested. "Preferential status in all markets. We grant them territory," another species offered. "Prime systems. Resource-rich worlds." The suggestions came rapidly, each more desperate than the last. Zar then let them speak, then called for silence. "All worthy suggestions," they said. "We will compose a formal invitation to humanity, offering our deepest apologies and whatever terms they require to return." The message was written carefully, signed by every council member. It acknowledged their mistake. It detailed the crises they faced. It offered everything from territory to resources to permanent veto power in council decisions. It was the most generous offer the council had ever made to any species. The message was transmitted to Earth on every frequency, in every language humanity had ever used. Then they waited. 1 week passed. No response. 2 weeks. Nothing. 3 weeks. The silence from Earth was absolute. "Perhaps they did not receive it," someone suggested. "They received it," Zar then said. They had verification of that. Earth's communication arrays were functioning. The message had been delivered and opened. Humanity simply chose not to respond. "Send another message," the Valorian representative urged. "Tell them we need them. Tell them the galaxy is falling apart without them." More messages were sent, each more desperate than the last. Each met with the same silence. Finally, a young council aide made a discovery. She brought it to Zarthan privately at first, but the council leader knew it needed to be shared. "What is it?" Vexillar asked when Zarthan called another session. "The aide found something in our archives," Zarthan said. "A message written by Ambassador Minjun Park on the night we expelled humanity. He never sent it, but it was logged in the diplomatic records." Zarthan pulled up the message and began to read aloud. What followed would change the galaxy forever, but first, it would break hearts that had grown too hard to break on their own. The message was not angry. It was not bitter. It was the saddest thing any of them had ever heard. Zarthan's voice echoed in the silent council chamber as they read Minjun Park's unsent message. "To my friends in the Galactic Council, I write this knowing you will never read it because sending it would serve no purpose. Tonight you voted to expel humanity. I am not angry. Truly, I am not. I understand your frustration with us. We do slow things down. We do ask difficult questions. We do insist on protecting those you see as weak. From your perspective, we must seem naive and obstructive. I have always known this day might come. I saw the resentment building. I heard the private complaints. I watched species who once valued our friendship begin to see us as obstacles. And I understood. Because you are not wrong about what we do. You are only wrong about why we do it. We do not protect the weak because we are naive. We protect them because we remember being weak. We were once a planet of warring tribes, killing each other over land and resources and ideology. We nearly destroyed ourselves. When we finally reached the stars, we were fragile and frightened and far behind other species technologically. If the galaxy then had judged us as harshly as we are being judged now, we would never have survived. We were given a chance. The Valorians sponsored us. Others taught us. The galaxy welcomed us despite our violence and primitiveness. We never forgot that gift. So when we see other species struggling, we help. Not because we think we are superior, but because we know what it means to be helped when you need it most. We mediate disputes because we have seen what happens when disputes become wars. We run refugee programs because we know what it means to flee your home. We staff medical stations in dangerous places because we have watched diseases kill millions. We do unglamorous work because someone must, and we remember when others did it for us. The truth you will learn, I think, is that strength comes in many forms. Military might is one form. Technological advancement is another. But there is a strength in choosing compassion when you could choose indifference. There is courage in choosing patience when you could choose anger. There is power in choosing to serve when you could choose to rule. You believe we are weak because we will not dominate. You believe we are naive because we seek peace. You believe we are obstructive because we question violence. But we have seen more war than most of you. We have tasted more suffering. We have climbed from darker depths. Our compassion was not born from weakness. It was forged from our worst moments and our hardest lessons. I hope the galaxy will be kind to you. I hope you find others to do the work we did. I hope you learn to value service and compassion as you value strength and power. Most of all, I hope you never face a crisis so terrible that you finally understand what we were trying to give you. But if you do, I hope you remember that we were here. We tried, and we never stopped believing that all life mattered, even when that belief made us inconvenient. Zar then finished reading. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Several representatives were openly weeping. "He knew," Trellick said quietly. "He knew exactly what would happen, and he still wished us well." The message changed something fundamental in the council. The desperation transformed into determination. If humanity would not return, then the galaxy would have to learn to be better on its own. The council established the Minjun Park Memorial Service Corps. Species volunteered to do the work humans had done. It was clumsy at first. Trade mediators who did not understand cultural nuances. Medical workers who struggled with cross-species disease protocols. Refugee administrators who could not manage the complex logistics. But they tried. They failed often. They learned slowly. But they kept trying. Director Qualis personally worked 12-hour shifts processing refugees. He learned what Sungmin Lee had made look effortless. Dr. Trellix rebuilt the disease control database from scratch, traveling to remote medical stations to gather data himself. Commander Vexelar trained a generation of young Krathax officers in human diplomatic techniques, teaching them that strength includes knowing when not to fight. The galaxy functioned again. Barely, inefficiently, at tremendous cost compared to before. But they were doing the work themselves now, and that mattered. They left humanity's council seat empty. A simple cloth draped over the chair, embroidered with words from Earth that Min Jun had taught them. Service above self. 1 year after humanity's departure, a young Pixian student in the new service corps noticed something on the long-range sensor network. She brought it to her supervisor, who brought it to the council. Zar then studied the sensor data carefully. "Are you certain?" "Yes, council leader. Human ships, operating in deep space along the frontier. They appear to be running rescue operations." The council pulled up more detailed scans. It was true. Human vessels were scattered across the frontier regions, the dangerous areas beyond council space. As they watched over several weeks, a pattern emerged. Human ships were still answering distress calls, still running toward danger when others ran away, still saving lives in the void where no laws required it, where no council could observe it, where no recognition would ever come. They were doing it simply because it needed doing, because people needed help, because it was right. They never stopped, the Valorian representative said, their voice filled with wonder and shame. We expelled them from the council, and they never stopped serving. Zar then made a decision. We do not contact them. We do not ask them to return. We are not yet worthy of that, but we watch, we learn, and we try to become the kind of civilization that could deserve their friendship again. Every council member agreed. Years passed. The galaxy slowly improved. Species learned to mediate their own disputes. Refugee networks functioned more smoothly. Disease control systems were maintained. The Service Corps grew stronger. They would never match what humanity had done effortlessly. But they were becoming better than they had been. And in the deep dark of space, human ships continued their work. Silent, unacknowledged, unstoppable in their commitment to helping anyone who needed it. The council chamber kept its empty seat. Sometimes representatives would sit alone in the chamber and look at that cloth-draped chair, remembering. The words embroidered on the cloth had become the Service Corps motto, service above self. It was a lesson learned too late, paid for in lives that should not have been lost. The galaxy would carry that regret forever. But perhaps, someday, they would be worthy of saying to humanity, we understand now, we are ready to try again. Until then, they would serve. They would protect the weak. They would choose compassion. They would be better, because humanity had shown them that this was what strength really meant.